Welcome to the Holistic Skin Detective. My name is Christina and I am a holistic skin health practitioner with 20 years experience in helping people find natural solutions to their skin woes. And I'm the creator of the KDC Skin Typing Framework. If you're here, you're probably curious about how to tackle hormonal acne from a truly holistic angle. In each episode, we'll explore the deeper connections between your skin, your hormones, and your environment because healthy skin is so much more than just the surface. So before we dive into today's topic, if you haven't yet discovered your own KDC skin type, you can find a link in the show notes to learn more. And remember, while we explore holistic approaches here, it's always a good idea to have your skin first checked by a qualified medical professional. Now let's get into the heart of today's episode. As a holistic skin health practitioner, I started out with a very simple intention to provide natural solutions that genuinely help people's skin. For many years, that looked like making customized natural skincare for my clients. Alongside that, I was designing and delivering natural and holistic body therapies, working with organic oils, essential oils, and moving deeply into herbal medicine. Over time, my work expanded into designing professional body and facial therapies. And when you're designing a treatment or a product at that level, you can't avoid physiology. You have to understand what's happening inside the body in order to support it properly. Only then can you choose the right plant, the right medicinal properties, and decide how those properties are best delivered. And then there's the hands-on work, the therapeutic benefit of massage, which very often becomes talk therapy as well. And because of that, I trained as a life coach. So when I design treatments, when I design therapies, what I'm really doing is asking, what happens in the body, what's happening in the mind, what's happening in this person's environment. And I ask a lot of questions. If you've ever had a proper spa therapy, you'll know the intake forms. They're almost a lifestyle assessment. But beyond the paperwork, when you're actually working with someone's body, you begin to develop a sensitivity. You pick up on nuances and on misalignments. You notice when someone's words say one thing, but their body says another. And as you work, those layers start to surface. And it's through conversation, through reframing, presence, that a shift happens. And that shift becomes visible from the moment someone walks in the door to the moment they leave. And I work with the skin in the same way. Over the years, as any long-term practitioner will tell you, patterns begin to emerge. And when patterns emerge, you research, you compare notes with peers, you study texts, and you read widely. There are thousands, probably millions now of books documenting what practitioners have observed. But here's the thing, information doesn't stand still. What someone observed 200 years ago or 50 years ago or even 20 years ago now doesn't fully apply to how we live now. Each generation adds new layers, and the practitioner, the expert, brings their lived experience into their field. I say this because I'm seeing more and more people applying generic information to very specific modern problems. And that's often where things start to fall apart. So what I began to notice was this. Skin would constantly break out in certain areas, and this isn't the same as traditional Chinese medicine mapping. This is something different. By sitting with clients, asking questions, and observing closely, I started recording common triggers, not just topically, but across the person's whole life. And those triggers were remarkably similar. And for a long time, it was relatively straightforward. Clients would come in, would identify a trigger, adjust one or two things, and the skin would clear. But a few years ago, this was before COVID, something shifted. I began seeing a significant rise in reactive skin conditions, especially eczema. Eczema is everywhere now, and there are eczema balms and treatments also everywhere, but few people are asking why. And with acne and breakouts, what I began to see was more concerning. Instead of one clear pattern, people were presenting with multiple patterns at once. That tells me something important. It tells me that there's just not one root trigger anymore. There are multiple drivers operating at the same time. And I'm seeing this primarily in women. That points beyond reproductive hormones alone. There's something broader affecting the endocrine system, and I'll come back to that. Because although everyone expresses these triggers differently, I can read the skin and begin to unravel what's happening internally. That ability comes from years of observation. And that's where the KDC framework comes in. I divided these patterns into two groups. We have simple patterns where one dominant trigger is present. And then we have complex patterns where multiple patterns overlap and need careful unraveling. If someone has a complex presentation, that requires direct support. But if there's a single clear acne expression, what I call an acne type, there's a structured pathway. You identify the pattern first, then you move into the corresponding program. And here's the important part. It's not about simply removing one trigger, because if you don't understand what's happening behind the scenes, you'll repeat the same well-intentioned mistakes, just in a different form. And this is why I no longer focus on topical treatments. This work feels quite urgent to me. We need to understand why these patterns are increasing and what needs to change in how we live. I believe that people experiencing these breakouts are actually in a unique position, because once you understand what your body is responding to, you start to see the bigger picture. And many people feel compelled to advocate for change in their homes, their communities, and beyond. One of the KDC types has a strong link to the endocrine system, and we often label this as simply hormonal. Yes, hormonals are involved, but hormones don't malfunction in isolation. They respond to behaviors, to environments, and to daily pressures that are rarely discussed. So instead of treating hormones, we need to look at what's driving them out of balance. And those drivers are different for everyone. That, in essence, is the KDC program and the work that I'm now doing. In doing this work, however, what has surprised me, and in some ways has been genuinely heartbreaking, is what I encountered when I started looking outside a standard clinical approach for answers. As I began researching, refining, and implementing solutions beyond the salon, solutions that address broader forces that were affecting our health, I started to see even more clearly how imbalances in our environment were impacting our health and well-being. What I wasn't prepared for was the level of resistance I received when implementing solutions. For me, if the skin is reflecting an imbalance, then to truly clear the skin, we need to look at what was taking the body out of alignment in the first place. That led me to train as a life coach with a well-known and respected social scientist. I wanted to better understand how beliefs form, how false narratives take hold, and how those narratives don't just affect us individually, but ripple out into our homes, our workplaces, and the environment itself. I became deeply interested in how reframing perspective by questioning what we assume to be true can change behavior, health outcomes, and workplace cultures. At the same time, my attention turned to the environment. First to the soil. I wanted to understand how soil could be rehabilitated so that our food could actually provide the nutrients we need. But the deeper I went, the clearer it became that soil biology mattered far more than nutrients alone. We now talk a lot about the microbiome. We take probiotics and hope for the best, but the soil is the original microbiome. If you look at your backyard and the soil is rock hard, if nothing is growing, not even weeds, then the biology has gone, and we need that biology. Years ago, about 12 or 13 years ago now, I was speaking with an osteopath whose mother was a naturopathic doctor based in Canada. He told me about a specific strain of soil bacteria that supports the rebuilding of the gut lining. At that time, the science was only emerging. But when I later found that strain in certain formulations and began recommending it to clients, I watched their skin change. That was a turning point for me, and I turned into a soil geek. I became deeply committed into land regeneration and not long after turned my attention to growing herbs for my business as well. But I didn't just want to grow my herbs organically. I wanted to grow them properly. I wanted the medicine to be strong, energetically intact, grown in right relationship as nature intended. That meant studying how nature rehabilitates itself, how plant communities support one another, and how monoculture weakens medicine. So instead of planting herbs in rows or randomly in patches, I began planting them where they belonged, matching energetic expression, building living soil, planting companion species, and honoring succession design to build a nourishing ecosystem. And the results were extraordinary. My herbs thrived. The land stayed lush even in peak summer. And while neighboring properties dried out, my soil held moisture because the biology was alive. Around my property, I watched in contrast the land degrading, and weeds were emerging trying to restore balance, would only be heavily sprayed out or overgrazed. As my property was slowly restoring itself, I could see more clearly the mainstream systems were collapsing because biology was being erased. And as I watched, it taught me something profound. However, what shocked me the most was the resistance that I received from people. Resistance to my results, resistance from misguided bias, resistance to the idea that we might need to change how we live. And it showed me just how much work we still need to do, not just environmentally, but internally, in how we see the world and in what we are willing to question. There's a phrase that the land is the skin of the earth. I almost called my podcast that, but it didn't quite deliver from a branding perspective. What we're really missing right now is connection between the problem and the solution. Because what I'm seeing now is this increase in hormonal and endocrine strain. And while the fix isn't complicated, it is confronting because we have to look at our lifestyle. We have to look at how our environment is impacting our internal house, how the imbalances we are seeing outside correlate with the same imbalances we are seeing within. This podcast exists to open that conversation, to help people understand the broader issues that are affecting our environments, our relationships, and our fixed belief systems that are causing imbalances within our body and ultimately showing up on the skin. Alongside that, I offer educational programs to help people identify how their body is moving out of balance and why the skin is responding the way that it is. And beyond that, I'm working towards something bigger. Because once awareness is there, the next step is support, helping people make changes, not just individually, but within their communities, despite the resistance and despite the systems that are keeping us stuck. Because our house, our body, our environment are worth protecting. So if this resonates with you, be sure to follow along as I continue hosting conversations about where and how we need to turn this boat around for the sake of our own health, the health of our families, and the health of our children.